So we've known that autism is genetic for over 20 years now. And what that means is that the cause of autism, whatever autism really is encoded in our DNA. It might also mean that some of that cause gets inherited from families. But the work I do is trying to understand how autism gets caused by the DNA that's found in our cells.
My own specialty area is genetics, where we can now identify the specific genetic cause or contributor to the developmental problems in a child in 10 to 20% of children. This can be useful because it allows us to identify, to predict some of the medical problems and other developmental problems based on our knowledge of other children and other families with the same genetic disorder.
So I think that the main part of what I do, if I had to put a label on, is behavioral phenotyping. So that the notion is to try to figure out across the entire autism spectrum how different folks might present themselves within autism. Kind of the holy grail that we're looking for in our field is to be able to match up specific subgroups, or are there specific types of autism that behave a certain way with a certain set of symptoms, with the notion that then we can match those up to a specific type of gene expression or genotype underneath it. I always think of it like we're trying to get where cancer was before. In the beginning, cancer was this end thing. They had no idea how you got to this end point of cancer. It all looked the same. And the more and more research was done, you can say, oh, it's this type of cancer or that type of cancer. And that led to much, much better focused treatments as well. So it's kind of the holy grail in our field, is to say, are there different types of autism, and can we identify those? And by identifying those, does that then lead to better treatment pathways so we can help the folks out better?
The focus of my work is really around clinical research. And specifically what that means is, what I've been most interested in now is trying to understand and characterize and understand the behavior and behavioral development, medical symptoms, neural signatures, that is what's going on in the brain, of individuals with autism who also have a genetic event that is somehow playing a contributory role to autism.
The research that I've largely been involved with has typically required that we do really extensive, careful clinical evaluations with our kids, and sometimes with their family members too.
For me, is actually a treatment study looking at use of a medication to treat the abnormal EEG signals that some kids with autism have.
What we do, families, at least the kids, kind of have some fun because we get to work a lot with the kids themselves, or with adults, and with their parents. So they'll come there, they might engage in certain types of tests that involve paper and pencil. But a lot of times it's just talking or playing with toys or interacting somehow. And our job is to be able to watch and assess their behaviors while they interact, to see and kind of gauge what type of behaviors we're seeing, and if they're different from kids who don't have autism. And then again, we on the backside then go back and match those types of behaviors to other types of underlying genetics.
Instead of looking for genes which were inherited from either parent, we look for new mutations. So these are single bases of DNA, sometimes larger stretches, which are completely new to the child.
We have a number of studies designed to look at that, better understand essentially the relationship between the genotype and the phenotype, which means that is the relationship between the genes that are involved in this genetic event and how those then play out in terms of observable behavior, the things we see in terms of symptomatology or medical challenges or issues, developmental obstacles, as well as what's happening in the brain at that time. So trying to understand the genotype-phenotype relationship.
Basically what that entails is some one-on-one direct testing with the child, sometimes very lengthy parent interviews. And then we also ask families to complete a variety of questionnaires that really get at development and different behaviors.
We actually really wanted to look at what autism looked like. We wanted to look at their behavior. We wanted to look at their some of the medical issues. We wanted to look at brain imaging, and so we got a lot of data. And one of the things that we found when we did overnight EEGs is that some of the kids had abnormal EEGs, and the question was, can we treat those? Will that make the autism any better? Will that make language any better? Will that make sleep any better?
Everybody's goal in autism research is earlier, better diagnosis and earlier, better intervention and treatment. The goal of improving outcomes and optimizing the developmental learning capacity for all of these children.
We now know that there are some types of genetic variant which are associated with autism, and that's been a big, big advance. Really, in the last 5 years, the genetics has shot forward.
In order for us to move the field forward, it requires a collaboration between parents, families, and scientists, because families and scientists work together to actually develop the questions and work together to answer the questions. And even though they might not necessarily help families today, we know we can be helping families tomorrow, which I think is the ultimate goal.
We are making progress, and it will be really wonderful to be able to go back to them and say, you know, hey, because of your cooperation, we now have this new blood test that we're going to be able to use in the clinic, and folks are going to be able to detect autism at much earlier ages. And we wouldn't have been able to do this if you hadn't stepped up to the plate.
You know, because they gave to us their time and their energy and their children's behaviors, that we give back to them the knowledge that we're getting. So it's incumbent upon us to communicate our findings, whether through newsletters or emails or phone calls, to keep them in the loop, to say, this is what we're getting out of everything that you've already given us, which is already a ton, and hopefully will be even more.